Stop him, please! The pregnant woman's scream echoed throughout the airport terminal, drowning out the unceremonious barking of the German Shepherd. Security officer Jason took a step forward, but Dane, his four-legged partner, continued to growl aggressively, his piercing eyes fixed on her rounded belly. What's going on? I didn't do anything wrong. Her face twisted in horror, her hands shaking, clutching her stomach like a shield for an unborn child. The next moment, she screamed, falling to her knees. Tears streamed down her pale face, and her eyes rolled back in her head. Help! Something is wrong with my baby. She barely whispered before she lost consciousness. Dane whined, sensing something no one else had yet understood. The service dog had been right. The best part is coming up. Stay tuned to see how it all ends. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Chicago's Lincoln Hill International Airport was bustling with people like a disturbed anthill. Tuesday was a busy day, with throngs of frazzled travelers merging into a seemingly endless line at the security checkpoint. Officer Jason Taylor stood tall, his shoulders tense under the weight of his immaculately pressed navy blue uniform, his gaze scanning the sea of faces. 8 years of airport security had taught him one thing. Danger often lurks behind the most innocent smile. Beside him stood Dane, a magnificent German shepherd with a thick black-brown coat and piercing amber eyes. Over the 4 years they had worked together, Dane had become more than just a service dog for Jason. He had become a true partner whose instincts had uncovered dozens of drug smuggling attempts and prevented potential security threats. Taylor, we're going to have a lot of headaches today, growled Steve Donahue, a stocky officer with graying temples, nodding toward the queue. 2 flights delayed by weather, another by mechanical problems. People are on edge. Jason nodded, not taking his eyes off the crowd. That's when trouble happens. People get nervous, let their guard down. It's the perfect situation for someone looking to exploit chaos for their own ends. Dane suddenly tensed, his ears perked up, and his body seemed to turn into a stone statue. Jason caught the change instantly. Over the years, he had learned to read the slightest changes in his partner's behavior. What is it, buddy? He asked quietly, instinctively tightening his grip on the leash. The German shepherd slowly turned his head toward the central checkpoint, where passengers were lining up in snake-like lines before scanners. Dane's eyes narrowed, his nostrils flared. He sniffed, picking up something that was beyond the human sense of smell. He smelled something, Jason said, exchanging a glance with Steve. Let's go check it out. They moved forward, weaving through the irritated passengers. Some backed away when they spotted the service dog. Others cast curious glances. Dane led Jason purposefully through the crowd, his steps growing more confident, his tail lowering, a sure sign that he was on the scent. And then he stopped. His gaze focused on a young woman standing at the very end of the line. She looked to be in her 30s, with her brown hair pulled back neatly into a ponytail and a loose dress that hid her protruding belly. She was pregnant, perhaps 7 or 8 months along. She held a small duffel bag in one hand and wrapped the other protectively around her belly. Dane let out a low growl that made the woman look up. Their eyes met, and Jason saw the tired look on her face turn to worry. It's okay, ma'am, Jason said, controlling his voice to sound professional and reassuring. Routine security check. But Dane suddenly barked, sharp and insistent, his body tensing like a steel spring. The pregnant woman's eyes widened in fear. She took a step back, clutching her belly tighter. Please keep him away from me, she said, her voice shaking. I'm afraid of dogs. Jason frowned. Dane had been specially trained to remain calm during inspections. He never barked without a good reason. Something was wrong. Ma'am, are you carrying anything that might interest a service dog? Steve asked, stepping forward and adopting a formal tone. The woman shook her head, her face growing even paler. No, nothing. Just personal things. I'm going home to my husband. Dane continued barking, now keeping his eyes on the woman's belly. The other passengers began to turn around, their gazes moving between the service dog and the frightened pregnant woman. The tension in the air grew with each passing second. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me for further inspection, Jason said, trying to keep his voice calm and professional. Why? I told you I don't have anything illegal. Her voice rose, and there was a hint of panic in it. My flight is in 40 minutes. I can't be late. Steve took another step forward, his face unreadable. Ma'am, this is standard procedure. When a service dog shows interest, we are required to conduct a thorough background check. It shouldn't take long unless you truly have anything illegal. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Please, I just want to go home. I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm tired. I can't be nervous. Jason felt a twinge of sympathy, but he couldn't ignore Dane's behavior. In 4 years of service, the German Shepherd had never made a mistake. If Dane sensed something, it was serious. My name is Emily, the woman breathed, as if hoping this personal disclosure would ease the situation. Emily Parker. I'm flying from Boston. My husband Daniel is waiting for me in Seattle. I'm a lawyer. I was in a meeting. Please let me call my husband. Dane suddenly growled even louder, the fur on the back of his neck standing on end. Emily's eyes widened in horror, and she took a step back, tripping over her own bag. Stop him, please, she screamed, her voice echoing throughout the airport hall. Jason stepped forward, trying to calm the situation, but Dane continued to bark, his gaze fixed on Emily's stomach. What's going on? I didn't do anything wrong. Her face was distorted with horror. Her hands were shaking, clutching her stomach as if protecting an unborn child. At that moment, 2 more security officers approached them, attracted by the noise. One of them, a tall African-American with piercing eyes, introduced himself as Sergeant Williams. What's the problem, Taylor? He asked, assessing the situation. Dane reacted to that woman, sir. I've never seen him so excited. Williams nodded and turned to Emily. Ma'am, we need to run a further check. Please remain calm and follow me. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but suddenly her face contorted in pain. She screamed, clutching her stomach. Tears streamed down her face and her eyes widened in sudden fear, completely different from what she had felt a moment ago. Help! Something is wrong with my baby. She barely whispered before her knees gave way. Jason lunged forward, catching Emily before she hit the floor. Dane had stopped barking and was now whining. His demeanor had completely changed. Instead of barking aggressively, he now looked alarmed, as if he sensed the woman's pain. We need medical attention, Jason shouted, carefully lowering Emily to the floor. A crowd of passengers had gathered around, shocked by the unfolding drama. Steve began to shoo them away, creating space around the woman who was writhing in pain. My baby? Please save my baby, Emily moaned, her face contorted in excruciating pain. Jason held her hand, feeling her fingers squeeze his with surprising strength. Hold on, Emily. Help is on the way. Dane didn't move from the woman's side, his eyes glued to her stomach. Jason had never seen his partner look so worried. The German Shepherd whined and tried to lick Emily's hand, as if offering comfort. After what seemed like an eternity of minutes, the airport medical team arrived. 2 paramedics with portable equipment quickly assessed Emily's condition, asking quick, clear questions. 7 months pregnant, any previous complications? One of them asked, attaching a pulse oximeter to Emily's finger. No, everything was fine. The last checkup, 2 weeks ago, Emily answered intermittently, each word coming out with difficulty. The second paramedic was checking her abdomen, his hands moving methodically but with obvious urgency. Suddenly, his face changed, and he exchanged a quick glance with his colleague. Blood pressure is dropping, pulse is racing, the first paramedic said, looking at the monitor. Possible placental abruption, the second said quietly, trying not to let the patient hear. But Emily caught his words. What? What does this mean? Her eyes widened in renewed panic. My baby is dying? Ma'am, you need immediate medical attention, the first paramedic said as he began preparing Emily for transport. We'll take you to the nearest hospital. Jason stepped back, giving the medics room to work, but he couldn't take his eyes off the scene. Something about the situation struck him deeply. Dane had somehow sensed a medical problem before its symptoms manifested. Steve walked up to him, his usually stern face worried. What the heck happened, Taylor? Jason shook his head, still shocked. Dane sensed something. Not drugs, not explosives. He sensed something was wrong with her. The paramedics were already lifting Emily onto a stretcher. Her face was deathly pale. Her lips were blue. She continued to clutch her stomach, as if trying to protect her unborn child from an invisible threat. Jason, she suddenly cried out as the medics began to lift the stretcher. The dog. She knew. She was trying to warn. Her words were cut off by a groan of pain, and the paramedics quickened their pace, heading towards the exit where an ambulance was waiting. Jason stood still, his mind racing. Dane sat next to him, his posture still worried, but the barking had stopped. He turned his head, watching the stretcher until it was out of sight. I should go with her, Jason suddenly decided. Steve, can you take my shift? Steve frowned. Taylor, it's none of our business. The medics will take care of her. No, you don't understand. Jason turned to his colleague, his voice urgent. Dane is never wrong. If he reacted that strongly to her, it must be serious. And she's alone, Steve. Her husband is out of town and she's scared. Steve hesitated but then nodded. Okay, but keep me posted. And don't forget, you're still on duty. Jason nodded gratefully and hurried out, Dane trotting alongside. They reached the street just in time to see the ambulance doors close. Jason rushed to the car, knocking on the window. I'm an airport security officer. I'm coming with you, he shouted, flashing his badge. The paramedic inside quickly assessed the situation and nodded, opening the door. Just without the dog, he said. Jason hesitated, looking at Dane. Leave him here? But Dane was a key part of this situation. He's a service dog, fully trained, Jason said confidently, and he somehow sensed her condition before it manifested itself. The paramedic looked skeptical, but time was of the essence. Okay, but he has to sit still. Jason and Dane jumped into the ambulance and the doors slammed shut. The ambulance immediately took off, its siren blaring over the city noise. Inside, paramedics were working on Emily, checking her vital signs and setting up an IV. What's wrong with her? Jason asked, sitting in the corner, holding Dane next to him. Suspected placental abruption, the paramedic replied, not looking up from his work. A dangerous complication of pregnancy. The placenta separates from the uterine wall before birth, causing internal bleeding, life-threatening for both mother and baby. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. His hand instinctively went to Dane's neck, feeling the warm pulsing under his fur. How could a dog sense such an inner state? Emily groaned, her eyes opening. They were clouded with pain, but still recognized Jason. You're here, she whispered. I don't understand. The dog, how did she know? Don't talk, ma'am, the paramedic intervened. You need to conserve your strength. But Emily kept her eyes on Jason. If it weren't for the dog, I would have gotten on a plane. No one would have known until... Her voice broke again in pain, and the paramedic quickly checked her vital signs. The pressure keeps dropping, he told his colleague. How much longer until we get to the hospital? 3 minutes, the driver replied through the intercom. Hang in there, Mrs. Parker, the paramedic said to Emily, squeezing her hand. We're almost there. Jason felt like a helpless witness to the unfolding drama. It had all happened so quickly, from a routine security check to a race with death. He glanced at Dane, who was still staring at Emily, as if still assessing her condition. She's right, buddy, Jason said quietly to his canine partner. If it weren't for you, she would have gotten on that plane. And who knows what would have happened up there, at 10,000 meters, without medical attention. The ambulance came to an abrupt halt at the entrance to the emergency department at Mercy West Hospital. The doors swung open, and a team of doctors in green scrubs were waiting. The paramedics quickly relayed information about Emily's condition, and the stretcher rolled into the building. Jason and Dane followed them, but stopped at the front desk. The nurse gave the German Shepherd a stern look. No animals allowed, sir, she said. This is a service dog, Jason replied, flashing his ID. I'm a security officer at Lincoln Hill Airport. This woman was under my surveillance when this all started. The nurse hesitated, but then nodded. You can wait in the waiting area, but the dog must remain under control. Jason nodded and headed toward the designated area. Through the glass doors, he could see Emily disappearing down the hallway, surrounded by medical personnel. He sank into a plastic chair and Dane sat at his feet, his amber eyes looking up with that special expression that always made Jason feel like his dog understood more than he let on. You saved her life, buddy, Jason said quietly, scratching Dane behind the ears. And maybe her baby's life. At that moment, the emergency room doors swung open again, and a man rushed through them. His dark hair was tousled, his eyes wide with panic. He ran to the reception desk, his voice shaking. My wife, Emily Parker. I was told she was brought here. I am her husband, Daniel Parker. Jason jumped to his feet. How could Emily's husband be here so quickly? She said he was in Seattle. The nurse checked the information on the computer. Yes, Mrs. Parker was admitted with a suspected placental abruption. The doctors are working on her right now. Oh my God! Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his face pale with shock. Is she okay? And the baby? The doctor will be with you as soon as there is some information, the nurse replied softly. Please sit down and fill out these forms. Daniel took the papers that were offered to him, but seemed unsure of what to do with them. He turned and spotted Jason and Dane. Their eyes met, and something about the security officer's uniform seemed to catch Daniel's attention. Were you there? Did you see what happened to my wife? He asked, coming closer. Jason nodded. Yes, I'm a Lincoln Hill Airport security officer, Jason Taylor, and this is my partner, Dane. Daniel looked over at the German Shepherd, and his eyebrows rose in surprise. A dog? You work with a dog? Yes, Dane is a sniffer dog trained to detect drugs, explosives, and other illegal items, Jason explained. Then added, but today he detected something different. He responded to your wife before she even showed any symptoms. Daniel looked puzzled. What do you mean? Jason gave a brief account of the events at the airport, how Dane suddenly became interested in Emily, how he started barking and wouldn't leave her side, and how the seizure began shortly after. The vet we work with says that some dogs have the ability to sense changes in the human body, Jason said. They can smell the chemical changes that occur with certain illnesses, even before there are visible symptoms. I've never seen Dane react like that, but I'm sure he sensed your wife's condition. Daniel looked at the German Shepherd with new respect. You mean the dog knew my wife was having a placenta abruption? Before the doctors? Jason shrugged. I can't say for sure what he felt, but yeah, that's what it felt like. Daniel sank into the chair next to him, his shoulders slumping. I should have been with her. We had an argument on the phone yesterday, and she decided to come home early. He looked at Jason with pain in his eyes. I'm not in Seattle. I'm here in Chicago on business. When she said she was flying home, I didn't argue. And now she's here in the hospital and our baby's in danger. Jason felt awkward at this sudden personal confession, but Daniel's voice was filled with such genuine remorse that it was impossible not to sympathize. They have a great team of doctors here, Jason said, trying to sound confident, and they were warned in advance. Time is of the essence in this situation. Daniel nodded, mechanically starting to fill out forms. You know, we waited so long for this baby. 3 years of trying, 1 failed IVF. And then, when we were about to give up, Emily got pregnant naturally. We were so happy. His voice wavered, and he fell silent, trying to control his emotions. Jason was silent, unsure of what to say. Dane, however, stood up and walked over to Daniel, gently resting his head on his knee, a gesture he usually reserved for Jason when he was upset. Daniel looked at the dog in surprise, then gently stroked its head. Thank you, he whispered, addressing both the dog and its owner. Thank you for being there for her when I wasn't. They sat in silence, broken only by the muffled sounds of the hospital, distant voices, the whine of medical equipment, the soft footsteps of nurses on the linoleum. Time seemed to stand still, each minute stretching into infinity. Finally, the doors to the waiting area opened and a doctor in scrubs walked in. His face was serious but not grim, a good sign, Jason thought. Mr. Parker? The doctor called, and Daniel jumped to his feet. Yes, it's me. How's Emily? How's our baby? The doctor came closer, his eyes tired but relieved. Your wife is in stable condition. She did have a partial placental abruption, but we managed to stop the bleeding before it became critical. And the child? Daniel's voice trembled. The fetus is in good condition. The heartbeat is normal. We will monitor the situation closely, but at this time there is no need for an emergency cesarean section. Jason felt the tension he hadn't even realized leave his body. Dane seemed to feel it too, his tail beginning to wag slowly. When can I see her? Daniel asked, his eyes filling with tears of relief. They're preparing to transfer her to the intensive care unit. You'll be able to see her in about 30 minutes, but only for a short time. She needs rest. Daniel nodded, wiping his eyes. Of course, of course. Thank you, doctor. The doctor turned to Jason. Are you the officer who was with her in the ambulance? Yes, sir. The paramedics told me that your dog somehow alerted you to the patient's condition before any obvious symptoms appeared? Jason nodded. Yeah, Dane reacted to her during a routine airport security check. She started showing symptoms just a few minutes later. The doctor looked at the German Shepherd with professional interest. Impressive. You know, there are documented cases in the medical literature of dogs detecting cancer, diabetic crises, and even impending epileptic seizures. But I've never heard of a case of placental abruption. He leaned in to study Dane more closely. You, my friend, may have saved 2 lives today. Dane, as if he understood what was being said about him, sat up straight, his intelligent eyes moving from one person to another. Doctor, I'd like to thank this officer and his dog, Daniel said. Can they see Emily too when she's ready? I know she'll want to thank them in person. The doctor hesitated. Usually only immediate family members are allowed in the ICU, and definitely not animals. Please, Daniel insisted. They saved the life of my wife and our unborn child. Just a few minutes. The doctor sighed, but then nodded. Okay, but very briefly. And the dog must be under control at all times. Of course, Jason assured. When the doctor left, Daniel turned to Jason, his eyes shining with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you and Dane, Emily might have... He didn't finish the sentence, unable to say the terrible words. I was just doing my job, Jason replied. And the real hero is Dane. He's the one who sensed something was wrong. Daniel nodded, petting the dog's head again. I've never been much of a dog person, but I swear, after today, I'll change my mind. 30 minutes later, a nurse came to escort them to the intensive care unit. Emily lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to several monitors. Her face was pale but calm, not contorted with pain as it had been earlier. Next to the bed was another monitor, tracking the fetal heartbeat. Steady, soothing rhythm filling the room. Daniel walked up first, taking his wife's hand in his. Emily? Sweetheart, can you hear me? Emily's eyes slowly opened, and she smiled weakly when she saw her husband. Daniel, you're here. Of course I'm here. I was so scared when I got the call. He lifted her hand to his lips. How are you feeling? Tired, but the pain is gone. Her gaze moved over her husband's shoulder, and she saw Jason and Dane. You came. Jason stepped forward, Dane following obediently at his side. We wanted to make sure you were okay. Emily looked at the German shepherd, tears welling up in her eyes. Your dog. She knew. She tried to warn me, and I was afraid of her. Don't blame yourself, Jason said. Not many people understand when Dane is trying to help, not threaten. Emily smiled weakly. Can I touch it? Jason nodded and led Dane closer to the bed. The German shepherd approached cautiously, as if understanding the fragility of the situation. Emily reached out a trembling hand and gently stroked Dane's head. Thank you, she whispered to the dog, as if it could understand every word. You saved my baby. You saved me. Dane licked her hand softly, a gesture that seemed almost like a blessing. The doctor, who had been watching the scene from the doorway, cleared his throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Parker needs to rest. Jason nodded. Of course. We're leaving now. He turned to Emily. Get well, Mrs. Parker. Take care of yourself and the baby. Wait, Emily said, her voice growing a little stronger. I want to know, how did you know? How could a dog know about my condition? Jason hesitated. Honestly, I'm not sure. Dane is trained to detect certain odors associated with illegal substances, but his reaction to you was completely different. I've never seen him like this before. The doctor interjected, stepping forward. If I may guess, dogs have a sense of smell that is about 40 times more acute than humans. When the placenta separates, certain proteins and stress hormones are released into the bloodstream. It is possible that your dogs sense these changes before they reach the level that would cause symptoms. Emily looked at Dane with new respect. Amazing. Just amazing. Daniel squeezed his wife's hand. Rest now, dear. I'll be right here with you. Jason and Dane quietly left the room, leaving the couple alone. In the hallway, Jason paused, leaning down to look his partner in the eye. You know you did something special today, right? He said quietly. Dane tilted his head, his amber eyes seeming to glow with an understanding that went beyond simple commands and training. As they headed out of the hospital, Jason knew he would have to explain to Steve and his other colleagues why he had spent half a day escorting a patient into the hospital. But he also knew he didn't regret his decision for a second. Stepping out into the bright daylight, Jason felt his phone vibrate. It was a text from Steve. How are you? Is everything okay? Jason typed back, all is well. Dane saved 2 lives today. I'll give you the details when I get back. Putting the phone back in his pocket, he looked at his 4-legged partner. So, hero, ready to get back to work? Dane barked, and they headed for the police car that would take them back to the airport. It had been an unusual day, one that Jason would never forget. A day when a routine security check turned into a rescue mission, and his trusty partner proved that sometimes a sixth sense isn't just an expression, but a real life-saving force. On the way back, Jason thought about how strange life was. If Emily had chosen a different security checkpoint, if Dane hadn't been so persistent, if they had ignored his reaction, the chain of what-ifs was endless, and each link in it could have led to a completely different, much more tragic outcome. You know, Dane, Jason said quietly, looking out the window at the city rushing past. Some people don't believe in fate or that everything happens for a reason. But after today, I don't know. It seems like you were exactly where you were supposed to be at the right time. Dane laid his head on his knee, and Jason scratched him behind the ears, a simple gesture of gratitude that didn't fully express the depth of his feelings. The day was not over, and work was waiting for them at the airport. But something had changed, something subtle but important. The bond between Jason and Dane, always strong, had become even stronger. And somewhere in Mercy West Hospital, a small heart continued to beat, giving hope to two people whose lives might have taken a completely different path if not for a German shepherd with an extraordinary sense of smell. "The doctors are shocked," Daniel said, walking into the room with a coffee in his hand. "They say they've never seen a premature baby gain strength so quickly. She's already breathing on her own and sucking vigorously. Dr. Klein says he's never seen anything like this in his 30 years of practice." Dane kept his eyes on the baby, his ears perked up, but his posture relaxed. Emily looked tenderly between the dog and her daughter. "Can I hold her?" Jason asked suddenly, surprising himself with his own request. Emily beamed. "Of course, you are her godfather after all." What?" Jason froze with his hands outstretched. "Daniel and I have decided," Emily explained, carefully handing him the tiny bundle. "If you don't mind, of course. You and Dane, you're part of our family now." Jason carefully picked up the newborn. She was so small that she fit in his palms. Baby Dana opened her eyes bright blue, like all newborns, and seemed to be studying the new human. "Hello, baby," Jason whispered, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spreading in his chest. "I'm your godfather. And this," he leaned down slightly, allowing Dane to sniff the baby softly, "is your guardian angel." At that moment, something amazing happened. Baby Dana, who by all medical standards should have been too weak to move much, suddenly lifted her tiny hand and reached toward the German shepherd's muzzle. Her fingers briefly touched Dane's wet nose. All the adults stood frozen, watching this moment of connection that seemed to exist outside of time. Dane very gently licked the baby's palm, and the baby made a sound that sounded like laughter. "It's unbelievable," Daniel whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "She already knows him." "Of course he does," Emily replied quietly, not taking her eyes off her daughter. "They've met before." Jason raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Emily continued, "When my heart stopped on the operating table, I saw them both." Dane was standing there, on the edge of light and dark, and next to him was a small glowing silhouette. "Our daughter. They were both calling me back." "I know it sounds crazy." "No," Daniel interrupted, squeezing his wife's hand. "It's not crazy, not after everything that's happened." Emily smiled gratefully at her husband, then turned back to Jason. "I didn't tell anyone about it except Daniel. I was afraid they'd think I was crazy. But I know exactly what I saw. And I know that both of them, Dane and our little Dana, are special, connected in some way we don't understand." Jason gently returned the baby to his mother's arms, his heart beating faster than usual. He was not a superstitious man. Years of military service and security work had taught him to trust facts, evidence, what he could see and touch. But these 2 days had turned his entire understanding of the world upside down. "You know," he said, scratching Dane behind the ear, "when I first started working with Dane, the instructor at the service dog training center told me something strange. He said that some dogs have a gift that goes beyond their training, something that can't be explained by training or instinct. He called it a sixth sense. I laughed at it then. But now," he fell silent, not knowing how to complete his thought. "And now you believe," Emily finished softly for him. Jason nodded slowly. "Yes, now I believe." Over the next few days, Emily and little Dana continued to amaze the doctors with their rapid recovery. Dr. Klein called it a medical miracle, though his eyes showed that he suspected something more. Jason and Dana visited them every day after their shift, and each time the bond between dog and baby became more obvious. On the 5th day, when doctors finally declared mother and daughter ready to be discharged, Jason received an unexpected call from his superiors, an urgent meeting at headquarters. "What happened? Did I do something wrong?" he asked Steve when he met him in the hallway of the administrative building. "No, buddy." Steve looked unusually serious. "But you better get ready. This is about Dane." Jason's heart sank. "Is there something wrong with him?" "Not really. It's just, you've become a celebrity. The story of the dog who predicted placental abruption has been all over the news. And now the Army Medical Research Institute wants to study Dane, to figure out how he did it. Study? Jason felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean? They want you to hand over Dane for research for 6 months, maybe longer. Jason stopped, feeling anger rising inside him. No, his voice was quiet but firm. Never. Taylor, this is not a request. I don't care. Dane is not a guinea pig. He's my partner, my family. The door to the department chief's office swung open, and a man in a suit, clearly not from airport security, walked out. He was followed by Sergeant Garcia, who looked annoyed. Officer Taylor, the man in the suit began, extending his hand. Dr. Andrew Pierce, Army Medical Research Institute. Pleased to meet you in person. Jason didn't shake the outstretched hand. I'm not giving up Dane. Dr. Pierce dropped his hand, his face hard. Officer Taylor, you must understand the importance of this. If a dog can truly detect internal bleeding before symptoms occur, it could save thousands of lives. Soldiers on the battlefield, civilians in accidents. I understand, Jason interrupted, but Dane isn't a thing to be experimented on. He's a living being, and he has rights. You have no choice, Pierce said coldly. Technically, the dog is government property. We can... Sorry, I'm late, a female voice interrupted him. Everyone turned. Emily Parker was standing in the hallway. She looked pale and clearly still weak from her recent surgery, but her eyes were shining with determination. Daniel stood next to her, holding little Dana in his arms. Mrs. Parker? Sergeant Garcia asked in surprise. What are you doing here? Emily Parker, partner at the animal rights law firm of Bradley, Parker Schumann. She handed the card to Dr. Pierce. And by the way, legal representative of K-9 Officer Dane's interest from now on. Dr. Pierce looked stunned. What? A dog can't have a lawyer. It may, Emily said firmly. Under Jones v. Portland, Police Department of 21, service animals have the right to legal representation in matters concerning their welfare and conditions of service. She took a step forward, and despite her physical weakness, at that moment she seemed to be the strongest person in the corridor. And by the way, that dog, she gestured to Dane, who was now sitting next to Jason, calmly watching the proceedings, not only saved my life and my daughter's life, she saved your reputation, Dr. Pierce. What are you talking about? I made a few calls. I learned some interesting things about your institute and your latest experiments, about how 3 dogs died last year while studying their extrasensory abilities, and how you hid this information from the authorities. Dr. Pierce's face turned pale. This is classified information. You couldn't... I have high-level security clearance, Emily smiled coldly, and very well connected at the Pentagon. Now, unless you want this story to be on the front page of tomorrow's papers, I suggest you leave, and forget about Dane. Dr. Pierce stared at her for several long seconds, then turned abruptly and walked quickly toward the exit. This isn't over yet, he threw over his shoulder. Oh, I'm sure of it, Emily replied calmly. My partners are already preparing a lawsuit against your institute. I think the next few months will be interesting for you. As Dr. Pierce disappeared through the door, Jason turned to Emily. How did you know? Daniel called your partner Steve this morning to check on when you could come to our discharge. Steve told him about this doctor's plans. She made a sour face. So, let's just say I decided it was time to return the favor. You didn't have to. I have to, Emily said firmly. And not just me. Dana, too. Little Dana, as if hearing her name, made a soft sound and stirred in her father's arms. Dane immediately perked up and came closer, looking closely at the child. See? Emily smiled softly. They're connected, and they always will be. Jason knelt down next to his 4-legged partner and hugged him tightly. Thank you, he whispered, burying his face in the soft fur on the dog's neck. For everything. Dane licked his cheek and turned back to baby Dana, as if to remind her that his work was not yet done. You know what? Emily said suddenly. I think we all need a break from hospitals and offices. Daniel and I were thinking of spending the weekend at our lake house. Quiet, fresh air, perfect for recovery. You and Dane should come with us. Jason looked at Sergeant Garcia, who had been silently watching the unfolding drama the entire time. Sir, can I take the weekend off? Garcia nodded slowly, a rare smile crossing his stern face. Take it, and tell your 4-legged partner I'm proud of him. He paused. And you too, Taylor. 3 days later, Jason sat on a wooden pier, his legs dangling over the crystal-clear waters of the lake. Dane frolicked nearby, unusually playful and relaxed away from the airport and his official duties. Emily and Daniel sat in lounge chairs on the shore, watching a German shepherd dart through the shallows, sending up thousands of sparkling splashes in the sun. Baby Donna was asleep in a portable bassinet under the shade of a large umbrella, her face serene and calm. Every few minutes, Dana would come out of the water, shake himself off, and make sure to come over to the bassinet, as if checking to make sure everything was okay. "You know," Daniel said, coming up to Jason with 2 bottles of beer, "I've been a man of science all my life. I only believed in things that could be measured, weighed, proven. And now," he nodded toward Dane, who was delicately sniffing the crib again, "now I understand that there are things beyond our understanding, and that's wonderful." Jason accepted the bottle with a grateful nod. "I was scared when I thought I might lose him," he admitted, looking at his partner. "Not just because I love Dane, but because I know now he's here for a reason. He has a purpose." "We all do," Emily said quietly, walking up to the men. She looked much better, the pallor gone, her movements more confident. "We just need help finding it sometimes." Dane, having completed his latest check, ran up to them and plopped down next to Jason, his side pressed against his master's leg. The dog's amber eyes were clear and attentive, with a wisdom that seemed to go beyond mere animal consciousness. "Dane was with you for 4 years, right?" Emily asked, sitting down next to him. "Yes, 4 years and 2 months. And in all this time, he's never had such a reaction to someone? Like to me at the airport?" Jason thought about it. "No, he was good at detecting drugs. He'd found explosives a few times in training. But what happened to you? Never." "Then it was something special," Emily smiled softly. "Maybe he was waiting for this moment, waiting for us." A soft cry came from the shore. Little Dana had woken up. Dane jumped up first, ahead of all the adults, and galloped to the cradle. He stopped nearby, wagging his tail and looking impatiently at the people, as if urging them to hurry. When Emily picked up her daughter, Dane sat down next to her, his eyes never leaving the child. Little Dana, seeing the dog, immediately stopped crying and reached out to her with her tiny hands. "Sometimes I think they're talking," Daniel whispered as he watched the scene. "In some language we can't hear." "Maybe so," Jason replied. And in that moment, he suddenly realized that his life would never be the same. Meeting Emily and her family, what happened at the hospital, the bond between Dane and little Dana, all of it changed him forever. It opened his eyes to a world full of secrets and wonders that existed nearby, but remained invisible until a special dog showed him the way. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of gold and purple, Jason stood on the shore, watching as Dane gently licked baby Dana's hand, and she laughed loudly, as if she had just heard the best joke in the world. Emily and Daniel stood nearby, their faces alight with happiness and peace. At that moment, Jason felt something warm and radiant spreading in his chest. It wasn't just joy or gratitude. It was the realization that sometimes the most important truths are revealed to us not through the mind, but through the heart. And that sometimes we need a guide, a being with a special gift, a sixth sense to show us the way to them. Dane turned his head and looked straight at Jason, his amber eyes seeming to glow in the rays of the setting sun. And in that look was all the wisdom of the world, all the secrets of the universe, and the promise that miracles were just beginning. "Thank you," Jason said silently, looking into the eyes of his extraordinary friend. And in that moment, he knew for sure that Dane understood him in the way that only a being who could see through the veil of the ordinary and into the heart of truth could. Little Dana laughed again, stretching her arms toward the sunset sky, and the sound, pure and full of life, echoed across the lake like a promise of a future full of love, mystery, and endless possibilities.